I'm going to call our meeting of our Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Board in order. We have enough members here for a quorum, so we've been called to order. We do have a quorum, and I'll ask now for any public comment on any issues that are not included in our agenda. If we have individuals that want to make a public comment. Okay, seeing none, then we'll go to item number 3, consideration of approving the minutes from the June 24th TERS Board meeting. You've been furnished a copy of that. Well, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
All right, we got a motion to approve the June 24th minutes. You have a second? Dudra seconds. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. Okay, the board meeting financial report. Mr. James?
Thank you. John James. I'm Director of Planning and Development Services. So you've seen this before, so I'm going to go through it fairly quickly, but in the South, we started the year with $576,000, give or take. You can see there the revenues that we projected. Just as a reminder, those are the projected property tax revenues for the year, although at this point, this late in the year, that number gets it gets closer and closer to the actual number as property tax revenues have come in. And then we have the expenditures. You can see the private incentives already committed, the $381,000. As you know, once you all in the city council approve incentives for a project, those get segregated out to a separate fund so that we don't spend them twice, basically. We also pull out the money that the city council authorized for the Chadburn Street project. That's the total amount in that fund as of right now. We also have some small funds for streetscape maintenance as well as operating expenses. Again, the streetscape maintenance is for things that the TIERS board in the past years have authorized funding for putting in street trees and landscaping downtown. If one of those trees gets knocked over, needs some landscaping to trim some bushes, those sorts of things, that money's there to do that sort of thing. And then operating expenses are just for the tiers for everyday expenses like postage and mailing out notices and preparing various different documents and things. Finally, we've got that total of expenditures leaving the bottom line, which is the amount available. I will note, however, that number is not accurate. At the time this report was prepared, the incentives that you all approved at your last meeting had not been subtracted out. And so with what you approved last time was $89,510. If you take that away from the 128, you get about $39,335 as the current bottom line number of amount available for projects. And then similarly, again, I'm not going to read through all of these on the north, the same kind of analysis with the starting balance, expected revenues, and then set-asides and expenditures, leaving about $1.3 million as a bottom line. Again, the projects that you approved last time in the amount of $105,349 has not been taken out of that. So if
Why?
I'm sorry?
Why wasn't it taken out?
It's just the process of we have to submit a budget amendment to accounting with the city, and then they transfer that money from one fund to another. That should show up in your next month's report, though.
It takes a month to do that?
Well, again, remember that once you approve something, it goes on to city council, and so that's a few weeks after your meeting. Typically, it doesn't take quite that long. It would take typically 2 to 3 weeks to get that done, just with the timing on when that was submitted. It took a little longer this time. Okay. But that does result in about $1.2 million as a bottom line number for what we have currently available. And that'll be important as a future item on this agenda is discussing a project for the north.
So
And
what's your new net on the north?
on the north is 1,223,264.
Okay, thank you.
And John, remind me, when is our fiscal year end? End.
September 30th, so
September 30th.
the new year begins October 1st.
Okay, thank you.
So these figures will all change in October.
We start all over.
It will, and basically the current amount of funding will be carried over,
Right.
but then we should get information, although that can take a little while because our finance department at the beginning of the year has to start estimating what the property taxes will be for the coming year. And so, for example, on that estimated revenue, that can take a couple of months before we have a good estimate number for that as well.
Okay, very good. Do we have any other questions about the financial report? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve this financial report.
I'll approve.
We approve the financial report.
Okay, and then, Tom, thank you. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment?
Yes, sir.
I really would, if the agenda goes out like last week, we can have, you knew what the net was gonna be, they should have been corrected. And we could get current information, that way we don't have to badger y'all during the meeting. Okay?
And I think we can get that. This report is actually prepared by our finance department, but we could add an addendum to that with those revised numbers.
Y'all can
Okay.
check with finance and get it done.
Yeah, I'll make a note to do that.
Okay, that's,
Thank you.
okay, that's a good point, Steve. Okay, item number 5, discussion and direction from the board on our incentive criteria.
And this we went over briefly last time, but you all recommended, since we had all those incentives to consider, you recommended tabling this and pushing it back a meeting.
Okay.
This is really a chance for you all to give us some feedback. Over the last couple of years, we've had some input from applicants about the process, and some of them have asked for it to be a little more clear what you guys are looking for, so that, for example, in the South, we often have requests for more funding than we have available, and so some of the applicants were frustrated not knowing what kinds of projects. They'd like to come with a project that you all would support and would get them to the top of that list as they compete with other projects. But they felt it wasn't real clear what exactly you guys were looking for. And so we're coming back with some questions. So I'll start with this slide, which is basically what qualifies as matching funds. What we have included in the past is only things that are tiers eligible. So sometimes a project will come in and there may be spending $1 million on a whole, building remodel, but we don't count any of that might be interior remodeling or other things that aren't tiers eligible. So in other words, they need to put up that 25% on expenditures that you all are funding as well. So not the overall major project that they're doing, but the tiers eligible pieces that they're doing. But that's come as a question from applicants in the past, and wanted to see if that's still the board's understanding or if you want to change that. A related question is, should matching be required? Particularly on some north projects, we've had that question. We've got all this money in the north. What if we said there is no matching requirement? We'll just give them the full 100% for a project. So,
Excuse me, there is no match requirement at all now?
no, I'm saying
There
we've had
is
some
now.
applicants suggest that we've got right now we've got 1.2 million out there. Why not just fully fund projects in the north rather than requiring a match, which is still currently 25%. Now, I will say, I think it's the projects of 10,000 and under currently do not have a match in the north. So that's one element where we have waived that matching requirement, but only for those smaller projects. I don't know if you guys want to stop and discuss that piece first, or if you want me to just go through everything and then we can come back.
I like the
It's really
idea
up to you.
of match applying to qualified items in the project. But, and I'm open to reducing it, but I don't personally think it should be eliminated. I'm thinking something like 10% or something like that requirement. Now, I don't know how y'all feel, I don't care. I'm just throwing this, open this up, let's talk about it, let's find out what we want to do.
John, is there any guidelines that the tiers, state guidelines regulating tiers? Do they have any type of
No.
guidelines on any of that?
No, in fact, I mean, per the state rules, you could fund all of a project, or you could, I mean, cities do it differently. Most cities that I'm familiar with do have some match requirement. I think I would encourage you to keep a match of some sort, at least in the south, just because we have so much competition. We really want projects that people are committed to. I think I would be a little worried with having no match, even in the north, but obviously looking at reducing that to a different percentage might be a good idea as well.
And maybe we don't want to reduce it, I'm just throwing it out, but is there a reason to have it at 25 or at any other? What is people's thoughts?
Yeah. John, well, let me put it this way. Have we lost some projects, say in the north, simply because folks could not do the match? That, in other words, they had a legitimate project, but they just couldn't meet the matching requirement.
You know, I'm not aware of any. Thinking back on projects, if there were any, it would probably be some of those smaller projects. So
Yeah.
Another option might be to raise that bar of, you know, right now we say 10,000 and under, there's no match. You could bump that up a little bit
Up to
as another option to
25 or
consider.
That's another way to look at it.
Yeah. Well, just because on your first point there, what qualifies as required match, since this was brought up, maybe several months ago, I was thinking, you know, your comment about if we were doing our funds were going into an external enhancement of a building or a project, but anything that was going inside, remodeling, enhancing the interior would not be meet the requirements of matching funds. But I started thinking, you know, really, even under the question, what is a project, I've heard our mayor state multiple times, do projects that will enhance the taxable base, the tax base of that, you know, that project. And so, you know, we're granting significant funds for exterior improvements, but if they were doing major interior improvements, that's going to enhance the appraisal from a tax standpoint of that property. So that was the question I've just had in my mind that I would want us to kind of revisit that, because if I wanted interiors put in 300,000, that's just numbers, 300,000 for exterior, but I'll put in 150 to improve the interior, well, that's going to enhance the appraisal of that project.
Correct, yeah.
And enhance, ultimately, and yours to the benefit of our finances to grant more money. So I'd like to hear y'all's comments on that.
I think I think you need to have some skin in it, which, whatever the percentage is. I know of maybe one building, and there may be more, that received tiers money and the building's just sitting there. You know, I think you've got to buy into what you're doing.
Yeah. Any other comments from folks?
I would vote for raising the amount from 10,000 higher.
Higher?
Not tremendously higher, but I know there's probably a few folks that I've talked to on the north side that maybe it's 50, you know, maybe it's 50K or something, and that helps them do what they want to do, because it's really difficult to get that match money at 25%. They want to do, and that's strictly exterior as well, so. But they still have to put some money in. They have to be in it to win it. I don't think we just give it away.
Well, John, would it be possible, I mean, we could probably sit here all afternoon and visit about these, but would it be possible for you and your staff to visit about these and bring recommendations to us?
Sure,
Yeah,
and I guess that really is the next step. I
Yeah.
think before we put something together, we kind of wanted to get a
Okay.
sense and hear
Well,
your thoughts
I
before we.
think maybe you just heard our comments or whatever, and I see heads shaking, but let's really rethink what qualifies as required match. I think we all are agreed that we should have a matching requirement.
Yes, yes,
And,
absolutely.
and the definition of a project is, y'all can bring us your
One way, John. to
textbook
look at it,
definition, but,
on any project, if you have a 10,000 no match requirement now, and say somebody comes in with a $400,000 project, or a $40,000 project, you put it 40,000. The first 10,000 no match, you gotta match the next balance, you see what I'm saying? You could
Yeah.
play with it
yeah.
in lots of ways, to make it more attractive.
Do we know what justifies a tax increase when there's a change to a property? Like, I understand paving, and I asked, Nolan, did you find out, Nolan?
I couldn't get an answer.
Okay, because I know paving is supposed to trigger an instant automatic increase in property tax.
Dale, we visited that when I served as co-chairman of the Downtown Development Commission, and with Tim Edwards, we had a gentleman, and John, maybe you remember it, but he was allegedly an expert in that question, and he said that paving does enhance the appraisal value.
So that triggers an increase in
Yeah.
property taxes.
And that was his, and
And-
I don't think I misunderstood him,
That's what he
John.
said, yes.
That's
Yeah.
what he said, because I know that was an issue that we were interested in, but he said, yes, it would.
What about any other elements that are going to be looked at, like, I'm going to assume, I don't know for a fact, but I'm going to assume when you put in a fire sprinkler system in a building, that may or may not trigger
Yeah.
an increase in property tax. I don't know. So some of the things that we're seeing more often, repeatedly, people are applying for, are those triggers to increase property tax.
And I think one other thing I would point out is part of the reason for the tiers and part of the focus on exterior improvements is kind of a holistic view of, if we improve the appearance, that's going to encourage other people to improve the appearance and encourage more businesses to move in. And over time, even if
Sure.
exterior improvement doesn't actually, may not change the value of that one building a lot, it adds to the sense of downtown is happening and things
Sure.
are going on.
And John, don't misread my comments. I think, our tiers funds ought to be exterior and whatever, I'm good with that.
Sure.
But I think that the required matching requirements, interior improvements ought to
Maybe broaden it
ought to
some.
be considered for their
Sure.
matching requirements.
So have we changed our views on paying for paving? I know we had reservations about that in the past.
That is one of the topics coming up in just a slide or two,
Okay.
so we can get to that in just a
All
second. Before I move off of this, we've had some questions about multiple applications. We've had some applicants, one in the south, for example, has gotten money 3 times from you all. I guess the question from the staff would have, should those be weighted any differently? If somebody's received money before, should somebody who hasn't received money get preference, or is it purely based on what they're doing? And if they've gotten money 3 times, they can get it again if they've got the best project. Just kind of getting your sense of, should that play a factor at all?
Were those for the same facility or improvements, or are they different locations?
Different improvements, but the same building. But I
Same
guess the
building.
same question would be is if it's the same owner that's doing one building here, one building there. But the one example is this old Central Firehouse.
Right.
And they've done an absolutely great job on
Fantastic.
that, but they've gotten money 2 or 3 times.
Right.
And so the question has come up from other applicants, shouldn't we focus on somebody who hasn't received money rather than keep giving them more money? Right now, there's nothing in our guidelines or policies that would say, there would be any factor given to that, but we just wanted to raise that with you all.
I know you talked about connected addresses as well as part of that.
Right.
So, we talked about, getting full amount for the address that's connected to another address and the full amount. So, and then there was people that were, I remember there was one session where we had to divvy what was left between 4 or 5 people that
Right.
needed the money. But there are, especially in the South, it's tight. I mean, you're looking right now, we're down to 39K. So it's real tough for some of the other smaller businesses to really get in there. So I'm, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I think, you know, it should wait a cycle or two, you know. That would be my vote on that.
No, those are good points, Tony. I'd just say, let's leave it an open item and let's hear from the staff. I mean, I think there's so many different scenarios that could come up. I trust the board's
Sure.
common sense approach to it and try to have equity prevail. I don't want to.
Now, before I joined the Tiers Board, you know, of course, we had a business downtown. We had a couple, maybe 3, maybe 4, I don't know. But we consciously wouldn't apply to make sure that people around us were able to join in. And if you can't build everyone around you, you just sit there and
Right.
look great. But it's nice to have everyone involved and sharing
Sure.
that piece of the pie.
Well, that's a good insight. John, just bring us regular. Here again, I trust this board's common sense approach to that issue. I don't know that I want a black letter law on it that would
Sure.
drive our decision making. I'd like, if it comes
Yeah.
in front of this board, I'd like for us to talk about it. I think we could flesh it out and come up with the right decision.
Yeah.
And it too.
Yeah, just kind of as some background,
Yeah.
all of these things we're talking about historically have been left more to the discretion of the
Yeah.
board, and the criteria have been more vague and open-ended
Yeah.
to give the board that discretion.
Well,
And that's really all we're talking about is do we want to tighten it down a little bit or leave it where it is or something in between?
I think what Jim said about the matching funds, y'all come up with some recommendations.
Sure.
And then let's just trust our judgment on these things as
Sure.
we go. After that.
So, and here's the priority of projects. We do have some criteria, but with that, trying to answer for an applicant, what is it that we're really looking for? This is something that staff put together as a recommendation to basically break the kinds of projects into high, medium, low, and then lowest, we called it. But really prioritizing historic buildings, front facades of buildings, as well as production of housing. And then a medium category would be other aesthetic kinds of improvements like landscaping or other building improvements. But then also health and safety, like fire sprinklers is one of the things we fund. And then a little bit lower would be things like signs, other building improvements. For example, the windows on the back of a building that aren't visible, but we could still fund them.
Right.
And then the lowest, as historically the board has recommended making the lowest priority, things like paving and parking lots, and requiring those or funding those only if they're part of a larger project. So this is kind of what staff came up with based on the general guidelines that we've sort of gleaned from you all in your discussions in the past.
My question in that is why health and safety is not a high priority versus a medium priority.
I think part of the reason is the biggest thing we get for health and safety is fire sprinklers, and those are very expensive. And in the past, at least, if it was a decision between improving the front facade of a historic building versus giving somebody a fire sprinkler that you don't see as an internal, the board has generally, gone with the project that improved the exterior appearance.
And that's what we're doing is exterior for the most part.
Right. And
Okay.
that's the only reason that item
That makes
is a
sense.
little bit lower than
Yeah,
the
that makes
first
sense.
one.
John, I'm in favor of all of those, and I go by that, but there's nothing in there that says what the improved taxable value of the property is gonna be, and that's our main objective. That ought to be a consideration. If we got a project that's gonna go from a $100,000 tax base to a $4 million tax base, that's a hell of an incentive.
I would say, I would agree with that. The problem from our end is this early in a project, it's very hard to estimate, putting in a fire sprinkler, how much is that gonna increase the value, or or replacing the windows, how much will that increase the value? And then we're either relying on the applicant's numbers, or we're trying to do our best to guesstimate what kind of change in tax base it would
Can't give
be.
you that information?
We could get with them to see. I think they're typically very hesitant to do hypotheticals of well, if you do this, it's gonna increase it by this. So I think at the end of the day, anything we do would be kind of a guesstimate. But we could look at some way to
If you can,
incorporate
there
that.
ought to be some type of evaluation regarding a statement even of the anticipated tax value
Sure.
increase.
You know, I like that comment right there, and just, you might, just in our, any printed material, whatever, state that the board is always cognizant of the impact of the tax base, of projects we're considering, and it's, enhancing said base to improve our, some broad statement, whatever, but
Sure.
You know, I would
That's a
think.
good idea.
I would think that the tax appraisal district would have guidelines to be able to help determine, as I said, what's gonna trigger an increase. We've learned or heard that parking lot or paving does. You know, so there must be some other elements that the appraisal
Yeah.
district guidelines that they say, oh, you did that, that's an increase,
Sure.
or it doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
So I think spending some time with them would probably be beneficial.
Yeah, we can do
And
that.
Dale, that's a good comment. Again, well, maybe a general statement again, that as a board, as a Tiers board, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the city to take note of the impact on the tax base.
Sure.
Just a general statement of some sort.
Yeah,
Because I think we're all thinking about it.
right.
You know, as we all look at our financials, we keep thinking, how can we get our tax
Yeah, and
receipts up? You
I
gotta
think
get
you're
your-
right. And by doing that, even if we can't specifically quantify it, at
Just-
least people know that that's something
Correct,
you all will
that
take
we
into.
are cognizant of that point.
Right.
Don't they also look at what else is being improved in your neighborhood? If it's a business section, don't they look at that? Like, say what's going on in
The
North
comps
Broad?
within the area.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much they look at if the building next to you improves. Now, when that building sells or rents at a higher rent, then that would be taken into account. I'm not sure if they take into account just the improvement itself, but over time, again, these improvements are supposed to lift all the boats, and that's kind of the long-term goal of all this. So just a few other questions that have kind of been discussed. Should we give more weight to something that's an eyesore versus something that's already been fixed up? So if somebody's asking on a building that's already pretty nice and they just want new windows or some new trim or something, should we prioritize a project that's an old rundown building that really needs more help? Or should that even be a criteria at all? Visibility we've talked about is that, like with the Stangos, I think we would argue that given two equal projects, the one with windows on the front would take precedence over the one on the back, but that doesn't necessarily mean we wouldn't fund the ones on the back, is kind of staff thinking. And as something that's come up from some board members in the past is it a speculative improvement, or is there actually a business in the building or going into the building? And so is that something that we should consider as a criteria?
I would think so.
That's,
See, I would think of like, Senior Chain, the third one, and also visibility. You know, the town and country had just sat there,
Right.
and wow, beautiful.
Now, the tricky part with that is, somebody can say they're fixing up a building for a business to go in, and then maybe the business backs out, and, it'd be hard to police, but at least as a general criteria to be considered, letting applicants know that that's something that you all will consider, I think is a good idea. That might be the last one, unless you all have things you've noticed over the years that are things we haven't considered or aren't in our criteria that you'd like to have us look at as well.
Well, I'd say I think you've heard our comments, and we trust you and your staff. Just bring us.
I had a question about signs, because I know at the very beginning, there was no signs. And then there's signs now, is that correct?
You mean in terms of tiers funding?
Funding of signs?
Yeah, I think staff's recommendations in the past have been similar to parking lots, is that we wouldn't want somebody to ask for money just to put up a sign.
Put a sign.
But if it's part of an overall improvement
Right.
of a site, then yes, that could be.
We have
Got
approved
it.
projects. I know
Got
when
it.
I first came on this board, we had a project on the north side and,
It was just a sign.
well, no,
Oh.
it was one of our requirements though, fix the sign. You know,
Right.
Do something
Right.
about the signage.
Right.
So, you know, I think that's part of our overall approach.
Right.
And
Well, I
sometimes-
just wasn't clear.
Yeah.
I wasn't clear on whether we were doing signs or not
Yeah.
doing signs.
And I think that's a perfect example of, there was a really bad looking sign.
Right.
And
I
the board,
remember.
they didn't even ask to fix it, but the board said, we'll give you more money if you
Right.
fix that sign.
Right.
So we can, you know, we can tie it in, but,
Right.
you know.
Got it.
And I think sometimes the signage as well works into the visibility of that business and its ability to be seen.
That's it.
Sometimes that signage alone, you're driving down, driving down the street and you don't even know,
You don't even,
you're already past it. If there's,
correct. That's
not
right.
saying that we turn it to a Vegas Strip or anything like that, but sometimes signage does help your business be
Makes a
visible and in turn make more money.
Well, signage can be the first impression of that business's.
Yes.
Okay, John, have we given you enough input?
Yep, absolutely, and we'll
Okay.
put something together and bring something
All right.
back at a future meeting for you.
All right, we appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to item number 6, West 11th Street project.
I'll introduce Russell.
Oh, Russell.
This is the project that you all asked us to bring back on possible funding for the 11th Street project. And so we've got the engineer on the project that will give you kind of an overview of what they're asking.
Okay. Hello, Russell.
Mr. Cummings,
How
how
you
are you?
doing?
Doing well. How's
Good.
everybody today?
We're good.
Good. All right, like John said, I'm Russell Pale, and I'm with Centurion Planning and Design. I'm here today with Mr. Hirschfield and Mr. Boyd of Winland Manufacturing. And today I'll be going over the overall project on West 11th Street, some of the challenges that we had, and some of the solutions that we've come up with so far, and project costs. If you're not very familiar with the project, this kind of gives you a general idea of where the project is located. On the south side there is this a laser pointer? Sorry.
Yeah, if you hold the top button and then.
Oh, okay. That's fancy. All right, so. Perfect,
Okay,
thank
now
you.
Russell, you're an engineer, so make us proud.
That's right. So here's 67, and US Highway 67, and then 87, and then this area highlighted in red here is our project. Here's Winland Manufacturing, here just on the south side there. All right, and this area is located directly in, or it's located in District 4, Lucy Gonzalez's district, as well as Tiers North. This is a picture of the existing conditions out there. It's pretty rough with all the rains that we've had lately. It's really made it a little worse for wear. But just to give you a general sense, this is looking east along 11th Street towards Highway 87. This is looking generally south across the street there and the drainage structures, and I'll kind of get, that's going underneath 11th Street, and I'll get into that in more detail in just a second. So the challenges that we had with this project, or that we have with this project, are obviously the road condition is in very poor condition. It's currently 18-foot wide, and it's very difficult for large trucks to move in and out of the area. Not only for, Winland Manufacturing, but also there's buttress recycling and some, some other potential for growth in this area. Currently, or previously, there was insufficient right-of-way for the project. It's an old part of town. It was, the platting of the adjacent properties was not done correctly. And
What's the width of the right of way?
Well, what we're proposing is to meet city standard, or what we've already done, and I'll get into that here in a second too, but we've already addressed the right-of-way issues. We've already gotten sufficient right-of-way. We've got right-of-way that meets city, but just to give you an idea, so this is how it was when we started the project. These blue lines shown here are the property lines A lot of them cross into the existing roadway, but we have cleared those up, and I'll get into that in more detail in just a second. Another problem that we do have is the drainage in the area. The drainage is a huge problem. We have approximately 185 acres that drain to 11th Street, and it's definitely overtops the road. And I have some pictures here. Oops, going the wrong way. So this is the drainage area that I was speaking of. The area highlighted in blue, everything from that point, or that any rainfall event that happens in that area falls and comes to 11th Street. And to give you an idea too, we have 11th Street again here on the south side, and then we have 19th Street, and it goes all the way, here's 29th Street, and just south of that is the Hirschfield Yards, or the old, what's now WW AFCO Yards. But anyway, it all drains down to 11th Street. That's 185 acres. One of the last things that we had problems with too is the existing infrastructure. We have the drainage culverts that are, from that picture that I showed you earlier, they're actually up here, and most of the drainage is going over the road further south or to the west. It doesn't actually ever get to the culverts in most rain events, and even the ones that does reach the culverts, the culverts are vastly undersized, and so then we have this happen. And this photo is after like a 1.5-inch rainfall event, so you can only imagine with some of the rains that we had last week that it was even worse than this. Then two, some of the other infrastructure problems that we have is there's currently a 10-inch cast iron line, or there was a 10-inch water line underneath the roadway. We have since relocated that and replaced with a 12-inch line. But we've already, like I said, this project has been underway for quite a while. We've been working with the city of San Angelo and Atmos Gas to relocate and replace the city's current water and sewer mains in the area, as well as the gas mains. We did move the water lines out from underneath what will be the new roadway. The new roadway that we're proposing and that we need the most help with is a 36-foot wide concrete roadway extending from US Highway 87 to just past Windland Manufacturing, which is about 750 foot of new roadway. We have already negotiated the right-of-way needed for these improvements, and so that the city of San Angelo can maintain the roadway moving forward. To address the drainage problems, we've sized box culverts where we would be replacing the two 24-inch pipes that are underneath the road with three 2x5 box culverts underneath the roadway to handle a 100-year, 24-hour storm event. Part of that too is, like I showed you in that one photo, where the drainage is crossing over, not through the culverts. Part of the upstream property, or on the north side there, it had some, over the years they've put fill on the property and regraded the property to where it didn't drain properly, didn't drain to the culvert. So we've worked with that adjacent property owner as well, got a temporary construction easement to reshape that so that it drains to the box culverts, and that way we don't have service interruptions during a storm event. And finally, project costs. So what we still lack are the street and drainage improvements. We've been working with Reese Albert Construction on costs and helping us to construct that. We're at estimates that we have been given by them is $579,900, and what we're asking for assistance on is $219,500. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Well, Mr. James, we'll ask you the same question we did, back in our June meeting. How do we help? How does this fall into our basket?
This definitely is an eligible tiers expenditure, so
Okay,
I think, as we explained last time, it's not eligible for an incentive request because those are to assist private property, and so it really falls outside of that. But you all have the ability to approve projects, like we've done some sidewalk projects, some streetscape projects in the past, but those are done outside the incentive grant request process. So that's, they had applied for this as an incentive grant, which
Incentive, yeah.
is not eligible for that. But again, as a separate public improvement project, you all have the ability to recommend approval
yeah,
of
well,
This is a city street.
that's correct. So you would be
It's not
basically,
private property, it's a city street.
correct, and that's why it can't be an incentive grant project through
Right.
that process.
Yeah.
But,
yes, sir, Stephen?
Russell,
Yes, sir.
who's doing the engineering on the project?
I am.
That's done privately.
Correct. Correct. That's all been
Paid for by who?
by Mr. Hirschfield and Mr. Boyd.
Ladies and gentlemen of this board, never in the history of the city of San Angelo have we asked either a residential community or a commercial entity, like Hirschfield and Wyndham, to pay for the renovation and improvement of a major street or storm sewer or water and sewer. We have always done it with city funds when any major renovation of this type has occurred. And so I think it's entirely within the scope of this board to approve the recommended, I think you recommended 400,000. Is that right, John?
well, they're only requesting 219.5.
You should have requested more than But anyway, I am very much, this company, since the Hirschfields have taken over, has remodeled the building, improved the building, increased the number of employees, the building, the tax base has been added to the facility, and they have contracts that are now ongoing that will carry this company forward into many more months. And I'm personally aware of some of those contracts after conversation with the Hirschfield family.
Well, let me ask you this, John, do we, if we vote to approve or endorse this, and we recommend it to the city council, are the monies available to do it?
Yes, as you noted in the financial report, we have about 1.2 million available.
All right.
In fact, if you notice, we have about 103,000 in the north that specifically was
improvements set
designated
aside.
for public improvements.
Okay.
We've just not had a project come up to use that. So
Okay.
I would recommend using the 103,740 first.
First.
And then
First.
whatever else is needed to get to the 219.5 could just come from those available funds.
All right.
Chairman, I make that motion.
We have a motion, we have a second,
Third,
second, third, fourth, and fifth. All right,
And I'm sorry, for the record, we had a hard time at the last meeting noting who made the motion and
okay,
second.
I'm
So
sorry, but that's my fault. I
If-
need,
if-
motion's Mr. Brown, and the second
Greg.
is Mr. Gaylor.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Russell, you did a good job.
All right, thanks.
Really did.
All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Any opposed?
Oh.
Unanimous.
I think another thing outside, just outside your scope, by these improvements will also help that river and where it comes and where it goes too, because after that last rain, the trash was ridiculous and crazy. So I think anything like this, especially with that much acreage flowing toward the river, would only be a help to everyone downstream, upstream, and otherwise.
That's right. That's a very good comment.
Good comments.
Oh, and I never considered that all of those streets turn into 11th Street.
Yes, it's a flood coming down.
But
there.
are we, this may be out of line, are we the 103, I think y'all said work to the 219, or are we
We're,
gonna do
we're
all
we're
of
gonna
it?
do the first 103 of the
First.
219 out of what's indicated in your financial report. And then the remainder will be taken out of the
Okay.
1.2.
In the next fiscal year though, will some of those just street improvements, will we reallocate some dollars for the next year? Once they're depleted, will those be able to be allocated again?
Well, yes and no. The board a few years ago had voted to set aside a certain percentage each year for public improvements, and that was part of that.
Right.
Subsequent to that, though, you and the council approved the funding for the Chadburn project. So right now, the Chadburn project each year is taking all of those funds. So there's still technically a public
Okay.
improvement set aside, but all of it is going into Chadburn
Okay.
until that project completes after 8 years.
Boom.
All right, those were excellent comments, and I appreciate it. Let's move to item 7, update on existing tiers projects. Aaron?
Yes, sir. Good
You're up.
afternoon. So I just want to point out, item 7, progress update for existing tiers projects, and item 8, update and discussion on tiers projects in progress. Quite redundant, so I'm going to combine 7 and 8.
I appreciate, when I
Yeah,
saw that, I thought,
absolutely.
well, there must be some difference, but I don't think it is.
No, it's all part of the same
Very
discussion.
good, all right, you got it.
To provide a more general update, we currently have 3 projects in progress in the south tiers and 8 projects in progress in the north. A general update for the board. Back in the June meeting, we approved 3 projects in the north and 4 projects in the south. And the total amount that was awarded across those 7 projects, just to remind you all, was $194,859, with 105 roughly coming from the north and 89 coming from the south. I'd also like to point out that we did have a completed Tiers South project between the June meeting and this meeting. That is the building, if you all are not aware, at 19 West Beauregard, so 01 Ale House Restaurant, right across the street. You see the before picture, and I wish that I could show you all some of the interior photos as well. Molly and David at Centurion kind of led the charge on doing that project, and it looks absolutely phenomenal. I've had the privilege to walk through and attend some meetings in that building, but just speaking to the exterior work that was Tiers funded, I mean, you can see the notable difference. And it's also important to point out that they're not done. Just in the last cycle, we awarded a project for them to install a cornice on this building, so more great things will be coming for this project as well.
Good.
I should also note before moving on that I am finalizing all the tiers agreements from the last cycle. That's why they're not listed here. By the next tiers meeting, those will be added to the projects in progress. So of course, the ones that we have recently approved will join this list, and we'll kind of break ground on those projects. In line with that, I received an email back on August 18th from Miss Christine Lucky. For those that don't know, she is with Big O Auto. She was actually the applicant, and she completed a project at 2311 North Chadburn. She is Big O Auto was one of the successfully completed projects. She indicated to me in the email that she will be unable to complete the work on 1212 and 1218 Chadburn, and she requested the board's authorization to terminate those 2 agreements. When I asked for more specifics, she just very generally said that there's resource limitations, and that just based on some other factors that have affected that project, she's going to be unable to complete those projects. So we're taking this item to the board today to request your authorization to terminate the agreements. Ms. Lucky did indicate that she will refund the $7,500 for each project, which will return not only $15,000, but it will also return the other $135,000. So we will now have $150,000 returned to the available projects balance in that tier zone, Tiers North.
In the south.
No, it'd be in the north.
North.
It'd be in the north.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm sorry she's unable to pursue those, but we appreciate her taking the action she has. And so, do you need a motion to terminate those, or is this an action item, or?
I believe a motion and action would be appropriate. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I'll make a motion to terminate the 12-12 and 12-18 Chadburn project.
Tom makes the motion. Do we have a second?
I said,
Ladies, we'll let the ladies, okay. Doug, Ms. Butler, she seconds that.
Thank you.
Well, let me say, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. James.
I only have one thing. We had talked a while back about a Fourth Street project.
Good for you.
Well, you might hold that thought. Apparently, there is a property dispute between TxDOT and a private owner
Right.
over who owns portions of that. The latest update is they're still working on that, so the city can't pursue anything with TxDOT in terms of acquiring that to do anything with until that dispute is resolved.
You can condemn it.
Yeah, we
You could.
possibly, that gets tricky when you're talking about a state-owned property. I'd defer to Brandon on that, but, the short answer is we're waiting.
You can do it, but it's difficult, I agree.
So at this point, we're just waiting until TxDOT and that property owner come to some resolution, and then we can pursue
Okay,
that.
well, Mr. James, if you'll just keep that item in front of him, just know that Mr. Brown and I got on that one day because we have some money invested in that street, and I went down the street, and I thought, where am I going? Where am I? So anyway, just keep that in front of you.
Sure.
All right. Any announcements or anyone have any hot future agenda items you want to make sure is on the agenda?
So we're not meeting in September.
We're scheduled to meet in September. Isn't that right, Mr. James?
Says October.
Well,
Yeah, your agenda says September. We have it scheduled every month. As you know, we often will skip a meeting if there's nothing.
okay.
I would say for right now, let's plan on meeting in September, but that is typically a meeting that we wouldn't have much to discuss, so we'll let you know if items come
I
up.
was confused. I just looked at my agenda. It said next meeting is September 28th.
Right.
You were looking at the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, until you hear from a future item from me or from Mr. James, or we'll say that September 28th. I will say to you, and I don't want to raise a sensitive issue, but, if this COVID matter continues in our city on the trend line that it's going, I might be visiting with Mr. James, and we might go virtual. I hate to even do that because I'm the least technical person in the room in trying to do that, but I'm gonna watch that.
Well, and I'll point out that right now, the governor's order, I believe, has expired, and so we can no longer meet virtually for public meetings like this.
Oh, we can't?
That could change. All
right.
But
Well,
at this point, our options are either to skip a meeting or cancel, or to meet in person.
Okay, well,
But we'll keep you
I
advised.
withdraw my comments. When I saw that 350 cases the last 3 days, I thought, where in the world are we going? So, anyway, I want us to be sensitive about health issues among us. So more to come on that, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
All right, under my authority, I announce our adjournment.